What is the greatest magic trick ever pulled by man? A lot of people will say that it was the trick pulled in 1980 by a man who goes by the name of David Copperfield. In September of 1980, David Copperfield will reveal the magic trick of the death saw, a trick that we've seen now over and over, a trick where someone is sawed in half and then put back together. He would follow that up in 1983 with the disappearance and reappearance of the Statue of Liberty. They're great tricks. They've gone down in history. But what if I told you that a trick occurred in 2018 where someone disappeared, but this was real life, and the police provided the illusion that helped the culprit escape? Does it seem too far-fetched? Well, listen to this next story, and you be the judge. September 24th, 1990. The world would make way for Kierra Coles. Kierra Coles would be the fourth born of 5 children and raised in the Chicago area. Kierra is described as genuine. She was loving, but she was also a feisty person, often dictating the lives of her brothers and sisters. Now, this wasn't done in a negative way, but rather in a way to show she cared. She had a great personality. She could light up a room, and with those attributes, she would quickly garner the attention of others. And growing up, it wouldn't be hard to make friends. Anyone who had the pleasure of encountering Kierra was left with a lasting impression. She would grow from a girl into a young woman. In the year of 2018, Kierra Coles would be 26 years old. And just like her younger self, she was still driven, working 2 jobs at the time. She would be driving for Lyft as well as working for the post office. While she was working for the post office, this job was only temporary, and it was something that she would do on and off. But being the driven person that she was, Kierra had made it up in her mind that she was going to work that temporary position as many times as needed until the company hired her full time. In the fall of 2018, Kierra had just moved into a new apartment, and everything in her life seemed okay. And she had one more surprise in store, because in that year she would also find out that she would be expecting a child. This child would be conceived with her then boyfriend, Josh, an on and off again boyfriend of 6 years. Kierra's mother, Karen, would describe Josh as a guy who was respectful. He never raised his voice, and from the looks of it, he treated her daughter right. Aside from the normal quarrels that relationships have, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. October 3rd, 2018. Around 8 a.m., the mother of Kierra would attempt to call her. However, her phone would go straight to voicemail. At the time, her phone going to voicemail wasn't alarming. But as hours pass and her mother continues to try and contact her, she still can't get in touch with her. So she would decide to call her then boyfriend Josh and ask him about her whereabouts. But Josh doesn't have an explanation. In fact, he says that he hasn't seen her and he hasn't talked to her. October 3rd would come and go, and the mother still can't reach her. But at this time, it's still not alarming. Not hearing from your daughter for one full day isn't enough to raise enough red flags. So she decided to wait until the next day. But by the next day, when she hadn't heard from her daughter, she knew something was off, because she would talk to her daughter almost on a daily basis. And for her to not hear from her by now was beginning to cause suspicion in her mind. October 4th, 2018. The mother would again try and reach out to her daughter, but the phone was still going to voicemail. And after several failed attempts, she would finally just hop in her car and drive over to her apartment. But when she gets there and knocks on the door, no one answers. The only thing present at that apartment was the faint sound of a TV playing in the background, but nothing else. The mother would then get in her car and she would begin to drive off. But she wouldn't get far before she would notice the car of her daughter outside. The car would be found up the street from a residence, but when she sees her daughter's car and she can't get in contact with her, she decides to contact the authorities in order to do a welfare check. The police would gain entry to the apartment using the leasing office, but once inside of the apartment, nothing seems odd. The house was in normal condition. Nothing was out of place. It didn't look like a disturbance occurred. The only thing that's off in this situation is Kierra's not there. After canvassing her apartment, they would then move towards her car. But when they get inside of the car, they would locate Kierra's purse as well as her phone. These are two items that most girls never leave home without. And the fact that they're sitting in her car and her mother can't get in touch with her immediately raises red flags. But to top everything off, on October 1st and October 2nd, Kierra had taken off work for the post office because she had some personal things to take care of, with one of those things being her first doctor's appointment for her pregnancy, which by her mother's account, she was very excited for. So the chances of her just up and disappearing for no reason were slim to none. After canvassing the area and knocking on doors, the police do catch their first lead. They would recover surveillance footage. In this footage is a young woman walking, but she was also wearing a post office outfit. However, the footage doesn't yield any clues, but it's just grainy footage of a girl walking down the street. This footage would be recovered from a neighboring home, and once they release the footage to the media, it doesn't generate any leads. Time begins to elapse, and it has now been 2 weeks since the disappearance of Kierra Coles, but she hasn't turned up, and no one has come forward with any information. At this point, the police have ruled out family, and they've even talked to the boyfriend, but they have no suspects at this point. It seems as if Kierra just vanished into thin air. On October 18th of 2018, the police would finally come to the realization that she didn't just drop everything and leave, but rather foul play may be involved. Although several media stations has aired her story, the leads that come in fall on dead ends. October would come and go, and then November, and then December. And by the beginning of the year of 2019, Kierra Coles was still nowhere to be found. But although the police don't have any leads, social media seems to have a number one suspect at hand: her boyfriend, Josh. During the course of this investigation, it would arise that Josh had another baby mama, and she didn't get along with Kierra. In fact, shortly before her disappearance, Kierra would get into an altercation with this woman. But those aren't the only details that raise suspicion on Josh. The real reason for suspicion is that Josh didn't help the authorities at all. When his girlfriend of 6 years went missing, he didn't search for her. He didn't cooperate. He didn't offer anything. So in the public's eye, he obviously might have had something to hide. But with no evidence to substantiate these claims, there's nothing the police could do. In March of 2019, the police would come out and release a statement saying that they had people of interest, but they wouldn't release the names. After all, it was an ongoing investigation, and in order to keep things tight, they didn't even tell the family who the suspects were, but rather kept it to themselves. On April 23rd of 2019, things become surreal because that was the due date of Kierra Coles' baby, but she was still missing. On this day, the family was supposed to be at the hospital bringing flowers and gifts, welcoming in their new family member, but instead, they were searching for one. Kierra's due date would come and go, and so would the year of 2019. and the family still has no answers. But to add insult to injury, any attempts to gain information from the authorities would fall on deaf ears because they weren't cooperating with the family. They didn't offer any information at all. And after 2019 ends, in the year of 2020, the family was fed up. And in September of 2020, the family would rally outside of the police station demanding answers. But the police don't offer any. In fact, the family is given the same runaround, that this is an open investigation, and in order to keep things tight, everything must be sealed. And to do the investigating, no one can know the real details, not even the family. But in February of 2021, things would take a drastic turn. After reaching her breaking point, Karen Phillips would release a statement to the public, but this statement would shock everyone. The mother would reveal that the surveillance footage released in 2018 of Kierra Coles wasn't her daughter, and the police knew this. It turns out that the girl seen in the surveillance footage was actually another girl who lived in the same area as Kierra and just so happened to work at the post office. And for the last 2 years, the police allowed the public to believe that this was Kierra, knowing it wasn't her. But to make things worse, the police were already in possession of a video that was Kierra Coles. In this footage, Kierra Coles can be seen entering a convenience store and using the ATM, in which afterwards she withdraws $400, and the mother's statement would eventually force the authorities' hand, and they would release this footage.
New at 10, new video in a Chicago cold case. You're looking at the last images ever recorded of missing postal worker Kierra Coles. She's seen here withdrawing cash from an ATM inside a Chatham Walgreens the night she disappeared. Just minutes earlier, video shows Coles driving off from her apartment with the man detectives call a person of interest. That same man returns to Coles' apartment the next day and left her car parked outside. Police say the person of interest seen with Kierra in those videos was questioned and gave a varying account of what happened that night, but no arrest has ever been made in the case.
In the beginning of this story, I told you guys that a trick occurred where someone disappeared and the police provided the illusion that allowed the culprit to escape. Well, after listening to this story, you probably understand what I mean by now. Because in the end, magic tricks are all smoke and mirrors. Look here, but don't look here. If I can get you to focus on one point, when I'm pulling the trick, you won't notice when it happens. And that's exactly what happened when Kierra Coles went missing. And the police decided to release the surveillance footage that they knew wasn't Kierra. You see, this surveillance footage is the equivalence of a smoke screen. You allowed the people to stare at footage knowing it wasn't Kierra the whole time. But while we were looking at this footage, the culprit was drawing more space in between him and the crime. Throughout the case of Kierra Coles, police have explored and ruled out over 400 leads. In present day, there's still no new information. The disappearance of Kierra Coles is still an open investigation, and anyone who has information is encouraged to come forward and contact the Chicago authorities.
I just don't want my sister gone forever. And I wish and I hope that somebody out there or somebody that do know what's going on can help us give her a safe return, her and my niece or nephew. We didn't get a chance to find out what it was going to be, but we hoping that when she finally do return, that it is with her and her baby.